Welcome to our video training for WIP and Advanced Projects by Progressus. In this video, we cover the close date and close by entry number that have been added to the project ledger entries that will enhance our WIP processing functionality.
Conceptually, WIP, one of the primary stories that we worked on for this release is story 40428. And the concept behind this is that various processes close project ledger entries. So for instance, if I invoice a transaction fully, then it will close it. If I only partially invoice a timesheet line, then it's not closed yet. So it's only closed when it's fully invoiced. And so when we talk about close, we're really referring to the open field is false. Okay. And when a transaction is closed, then we are going to populate that transaction with both a close date and a close entry number. So I'm going to show you some product, but there's a lot going on with this story. So hopefully this will help kind of clarify what we're planning to do here. So there are more than just one scenario that would close a transaction. The most common scenario is we fully invoice it, or we may close it using that close lines and close invoice lines in the invoice suggestions. And so I've outlined the primary scenarios that we would encounter that would cause a transaction to close. And then I also beside it put what is the source of the close date. So if you fully invoice a transaction, the close date will be the invoice date when it was fully closed. If we use the close invoice lines in the invoice suggestions, we use the work date for the close date. We also do that even if you partially invoice it and then later close it using close lines, it would still use that work date. If a line is unchargeable and then you uncheck chargeable, then we also populate it with the work date. Move entries is a little different in that we have two scenarios related to move, and this is only with audit because if it's non-chargeable if the original transaction, and then we create a new line that it will also be non-chargeable, we pick up the close date of that original record. So if the original record had a close date of 5/1, if you move it and created a new line, the new record would also have 5/1 for the close date. If it's chargeable, we're going to pick up the closing date, the posting date of the reversing entry. So let's look at a couple things here. Okay, so this entry here is an example of, let me go this way. Okay, so you'll see this quantity of 20 line I moved it. Okay, so you'll see I got a negative 20 and a positive 20. I moved it to a new task. So it was originally task 20. I moved it to task 40. So when I moved it, the open field unchecked for both the original usage line and the negative line to move it. And then you'll see the new line is still open. So there's no close date on the new line. Okay. The other thing is you can see that the closed entry number is 241, which is the reversing line that it created to offset the original line. So this is now 241. And then the close date, it picked up the posting date of this original record. So this 9/23/21 was the original record. So it was closed on that date for both of those entries. Since this one is open, there's no close date. This entry here, let's see. So this third line here was an entry that was originally entered as chargeable. And then I unchecked the chargeable field. And so it populated the close date based off of my working date. And then this last one, this 10 hours here, this was originally 10 hours, and then I ran an invoice through. And then this sales invoice line here closed this 10 hours. So you'll see my original entry had a posting date of 9:30. I ran the sales invoice, and the invoicing date was 10:15, as seen here. This date is 10:15. So this entry picked up 10:15 for the close date, and it also picked up that line entry number 240 closed it. So that's why that's populated here. Since this is closes itself, this has the same close entry number here with the same close date. The primary objective for populating this close date is really to allow us to improve our WIP functionality. So previously, to updating the WIP functionality, if you had a timesheet of 10 hours that you entered and you ran WIP for it, so it had a 5/1 date, and then you ran WIP for 5/31, it would calculate WIP for the entire 10 hours, which is completely accurate. However, previously, if you then invoiced 3 of those on 6/4 and you ran WIP for 5/31 or even 6/30, we would get the entire 10 hours put back into WIP because it would not recognize a partial WIP. Okay. So now it recognizes that you have a remaining of 7. And when you run WIP for 6/30, it will back out the original 10 and put in 7 more. And then when we run WIP for the close date, if we have, let's say we invoice the remaining 7, if we run WIP for 7/31, it will reverse 3 and no new WIP will be added. But the best part of this is even after we've done all these steps, if we would rerun WIP for 5/31, it would still recognize that there are 10 hours available at 5/31 because it knows when all these occurred and the close date of when they happen. So we have the sales value here. So I should caveat that the close date is working in conjunction with this usage and sales open entries method. Okay. So when we choose this combination, it can be either sales value or cost value. Doesn't matter which one of these you choose, the same result happens. The only difference is the amount that's posted, but we can handle partial and so forth. So here's my setup. Let's look at the ledger entries that I have for these. Okay, so this gets fun, but that's okay. So I'm going to narrow it down to Bill Arden. Okay. So this is Bill Arden, and we had this 10 units here. So this is the exact same example I just showed you on the slide, but we're just going to calculate WIP to just show you what it happens. So I have 10 hours on my original usage, and then I billed 3 on 6/22. So if I run WIP for 5/31, I should get 10 hours for $1,500. Okay, so let's go do that. Confirm that's what happened. So under old scenario, we would no longer get WIP because it's completely closed. And now we should get WIP because it's going to recognize that we have the dates and partial invoicing. So let's go 5/31/20. We'll run it for that date. It's successfully calculated, and I want to view my results. So I did get 1 record for that full $1,500 price. Okay. I'm choosing not to post it just so we can just stick with the calculations themselves. Okay. Now I'll run it for 6/30. So on 6/30, I should have a net WIP for a quantity of 7 and the price would be the 1,500 minus the 450. Okay. Successfully calculated. Let's see what we did get. Okay, so now we have for 630, $1,050. Okay. I don't want to post it. So let's do one more calculation. I will do it. So then you'll notice I build it on 715. So if I run this for 730, I should only get WIP for actually nothing, right? Because this is fully invoiced here. So I would get a zero amount. Now I threw in another transaction. So I did a manual sales entry to Bill Arden, but we don't want that to affect WIP either. So if I run it for 731, I should get no WIP because this original entry is closed and we don't want this entry to be included. Okay. Okay, so no new entries created. And if I go here, you'll notice I have no entries now. Okay. Now, if I would run it for 9/30/2021, I would not get any WIP because chargeable is false. Okay. So if I go here and run for WIP, now I do want to tell you, if it's sales, if we just use usage entries, then it does honor this non-chargeable here. Okay. And we're just, the only thing that matters is the posting date. So I'll have another slide. Let me go through with the rest of my slides. So if it's TM usage entries only, then it uses the posting date to determine if it's included in WIP. WIP will continue to accumulate because we're not looking, it's not going to close, or we don't care when it's closed. Okay. And the closing date doesn't reverse WIP at all. And the only way to reverse it would be using the WIP clear feature to reverse it. Same thing we did with the sales entries. So if you use sales entries only instead of the usage and sales, same concept. We're just picking up sales entries as they're posted. And that's whether it comes through invoice suggestions or manual sales entry, we just brought them all through to WIP. So we just assumed, excuse me, if you're including sales entry, you would want to include any sales entry wherever it originated from. Okay.
So for a fixed price scenario, do you still have the recognition action?
Yeah, fixed price, we have not changed anything on that at this time, Stefan. So all the changes were related to TM. Last slide, I just want to show you visually kind of what the impact of this is. So this first column shows calculate until date. And so this is the posting date of the transaction. And then if depending on what the close date is, this is how we handle it. So obviously if the transaction is still open, this should have true here. So if the transaction is open and true, then wait, I'm backwards on hold on. Oh, in all these instances, the calculate until date is prior to the posting date. So that's why these are excluded. So here, there's the posting date is the thing that disqualifies it from being considered in the calculation. Okay. On the bottom 3 lines, we have the until date is after the posting date. So now we make a decision, how do we handle WIP? So we've decided that if the close date is blank, which will be all the historical records that existed, we will not bring it into WIP because that's what currently happens. If the close date is before the WIP until date, then again, we would not include it in WIP. And if the close date is after the WIP until date, then it would be included in WIP. So this is just a simple graph to show kind of big picture how we're getting to that data.
Thank you for your time to review our video on WIP processing with closed date and closed entry numbers in advanced projects by Progressus. For more information on WIP processing, please be sure to review the help content in the links noted on this page.